Hi, my name is Ian, and this is Brian, and we're here to tell you guys about executive overreach throughout history. Now, what is executive overreach, you might ask? I'll let my friend Brian explain.
Executive overreach refers to any act committed by the president that has the intent of undermining other sources of power. These institutions are usually in the federal government and include the legislative and judicial branches. However, this concept also applies to attacks on the power of institutions that lie outside the government, specifically the media.
Well, the democratic system that governs us today may be designed to prevent any imbalances of power from happening. That doesn't always happen. And if any of you have been paying attention to the news recently, you would see that our current president, Donald J. Trump, has frequently abused his power recently invested in him. Many of his actions undermine the authority of the other branches and grow his personal power. Historically, however, this has happened many other times, sometimes in even worse cases. In fact, it has happened so many times that you could probably create a list out of it.
So that's what we did.
Now, before we get into our list, it's important that we go over how we will rank them.
While researching this topic, we realized the actions of the presidents could be placed into 5 categories.
The first type of overreach is restriction of the media. The First Amendment promises the freedom of speech and press, and by restricting this right, the president abuses his presidential power. Examples of this include censorship and the withholding of information from the press.
The second way presidents have tried to tip the balance of power is through attacks on the judicial branch. These attacks generally involve public statements that seek to lessen the credibility of judges and the branch overall, but can even involve presidents directly assaulting the authority of the courts.
Another type of executive overreach is the undermining of the power of Congress. Congress is meant to be the lawmaking body for the U.S., and by undermining them, the president can make his own laws, overreaching his power. This is mainly accomplished through executive orders and excessive vetoes, which vetoes are another example of this overreach. The president can use carefully worded executive orders to do things that, if done directly, would blatantly violate the Constitution. The Constitution is designed to be the ultimate law for the country, and by undermining it, the president exceeds its power.
All the ways in which presidents have sought to tip the balance of power are scary, as they threaten the very existence of the democracy that we all benefit from. However, some are definitely more frightening than others, and the final pathway which we identified is perhaps the most scary, the utilization of populism. Because America is a democracy of sorts, the sentiments of the people play a large role in who holds power in Washington, D.C. Many populist sentiments, such as racism and general fear, have been used by presidents in the past to grow the scope of their power and extort loyalty from their constituents in Congress and the courts.
Now, let's begin our list.
In 5th place, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt. FDR was in power from his first inauguration in 1933 until his death in April of 1945, and is the only president in our nation's history to serve 3 terms. He was also president during perhaps the most tumultuous times in our nation's history, so right off the bat, you can probably see why he might have made it on this list. FDR fits into 2 of our categories, attacking the courts and utilizing populism. FDR's attempts to undermine the courts occurred during the gloomy days of the Great Depression. FDR was in the process of getting his New Deal reforms passed, and the Supreme Court was shooting down his bills as quickly as he could get Congress to pass them. According to the Gilder-Lehrman Institute, these bills were for the most part designed to regulate prices and banks, both of which were central to his plans. Very quickly, FDR realized that his biggest foe was the Supreme Court. 4 of the 9 judges were staunch conservatives, and the other 5 were unpredictable in their stances, so FDR tried to add more judges to the Supreme Court to dilute the conservative presence and get his bills through. But this was not to be, and people from all branches of the government, even those in his inner circle, opposed the plan. However, while FDR's attacks on the courts may have failed, his usage of populism proved to be quite successful. In the 1930s and 40s were times of fear and anxiety, and FDR managed to win the loyalty and even affection of the vast majority of the American people. This made FDR a very powerful man, and consequently, many congressmen went along with FDR's plans who otherwise wouldn't have. Economic and political anxiety weren't the only sentiments that FDR tapped into. He manipulated emotions that invariably flare up in American society when war begins: fear and racism. The attacks on Pearl Harbor and the Aleutian Islands sent a wave of hysteria across the United States. People feared the Japanese would invade at any minute, and not surprisingly, hatred against Japanese Americans escalated dramatically. FDR tapped into this fear, and his subsequent decisions, such as the passage of the now infamous Executive Order 9066, satisfied the prejudices of the people while simultaneously giving the White House unprecedented power. FDR is at the bottom of our list for a few reasons. First of all, he only fell into 2 of our 5 categories, which is a tie for the lowest number, and also because of the chaotic times FDR served during, most of the power he gained was given to him.
Another president who overreached his power was the second president of the United States, John Adams. As a Federalist, he entered the office in 1797 with great popularity, but as his presidency wore on, he became decreasingly popular, with the Democratic Republicans rising in popularity. To combat this, Adams passed the Alien and Sedition Acts. These acts were designed to suppress the power of the Democratic Republicans by restricting the people. The Alien Act allowed the U.S. to imprison and deport non-citizens along with deporting people hailing from belligerent nations. This, coupled with the Naturalization Acts, which changed the required years of living in the U.S. from 5 to 14 in order to get citizenship, demonstrated overreach as it allowed Adams to restrict the voting of many Democratic Republicans. The worst offender of these acts, however, was the Sedition Act. It allowed the government to imprison people who made negative statements about the government, undermining the First Amendment guarantee to free speech. This grew the president's power by limiting critique of him and suppressing other Democratic Republican power. A second example of executive overreach by Adams is the midnight appointments. Even with the Alien Sedition Act, Adams was on the verge of losing the election. Knowing this, Adams passed the Judiciary Reorganization Act, which reorganized the courts and allowed him to appoint a lot of new Federalist judges. This is executive overreach as it undermined the way the judicial system was supposed to function, turning in favor of the Federalists. While John Adams certainly committed executive overreach, his actions overall had very little impact on U.S. history. His actions could have been very bad if the Alien and Sedition Acts were enforced more. Additionally, the midnight appointments led to judicial review, a very strong force in combating overreach in the government. Overall, we put Adams in fourth because his actions ultimately did not have a huge impact on U.S. history.
In third place, we have Donald Trump. Now, before you all get mad and rant about our project in the comments, please let us explain why the current president is not at the top of the list. As of June 7, 2017 at 6:36 p.m., Trump has been in office exactly 138 days, 8 hours, and 50 minutes. Less than 10% of his first term. Yet in this time, he has somehow managed to fit into 4 of our categories. He has attacked the media, tried to undermine the power of the courts, wields populist rhetoric like a club, and still is trying to maneuver around the Constitution and his executive orders. By the numbers, no president in American history has attacked a wider variety of empowered American institutions, let alone in under 5 months. Trump's attacks on the media were the highlight of the election, and Trump has promised that, if possible, he would take steps to restrict their ability to operate freely. To provide evidence, we found a primary source.
What is it?
Trump's Twitter page. Here's a link. Anyways, Trump's attacks in the judicial branch include the following: saying a judge couldn't investigate Trump University because of his Mexican heritage, saying outright that the courts can't block his travel ban, implying the courts seek to aid terrorists by blocking his travel ban, implying the courts seek to aid terrorists by blocking his travel ban once again, and questioning the sanity of the judge from Seattle who shot down his travel ban. All these incidents were televised live, and an attack on the Mexican judge, who by the way was born in Indiana, happened before Trump had even been elected. So far, Trump's relationship with the Constitution has not been good. This was highlighted in the controversy over his internationally condemned travel bans, which Trump still won't back down over. According to ABC News, the executive order named, and begin quote, protecting the nation from forced terrorist entry into the United States, took immediate effect to bar admission to the U.S. all people with non-immigrant or immigrant visas from 7 countries: Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen for 90 days. It also bars entry to all refugees from anywhere in the world for 120 days and placed an indefinite ban on all refugees from war-torn Syria, end quote. This travel ban targeted people from terrorist countries, but clearly was a ban on Muslim people. This ban targeted people from majority Muslim countries, and Trump even called for a Muslim ban during the presidential campaign. What Trump was trying to get around in this part is the part of the Constitution which prevents laws and executive orders from targeting religious groups. To do this, Trump and his team shamelessly lied about the nature of the order. Thankfully, however, a federal judge from Seattle, 206, Washington, saw through the lie and placed a restraining order on Trump's executive order. Populism is the last category that Trump has managed to get himself into. Since the founding of our country, social progress has been relatively constant. In the last 60 years or so, this process began speeding up greatly. In the last 10 years, has accelerated once again. This process has made many people with strongly held traditional values increasingly angry as they watch their preferred social hierarchy begin to fall to pieces around them. Trump managed to tap into this negative energy, and his message of hateful nostalgia has won him a sizable group of loyal and at times even radical supporters. The New York Times calls these people authoritarian voters and claim that, begin quote, research shows that authoritarians find social change very threatening. When they are scared, they seek out strongman leaders and support harsh, punitive policies against immigrants and other outsiders, end quote. In effect, Trump has loyal backing of extremely angry people who go after anyone who opposes him. Consequently, many prominent people in his party who would have otherwise opposed him, like Paul Ryan or Marco Rubio, continue to stand by him out of fear that Trump supporters will turn on them too. In light of these facts, one still might wonder why Trump is at the top of the list, and the answer is simple. As scary as Trump's attempts at overreach might be, most of his executive orders have been indirect, meaning that so far Trump has been mostly all talk, and is yet to openly defy the power of one of the larger institutions that keep him in check. Furthermore, Trump's attempts at undermining the balance of powers have, much like his presidency as a whole, been a complete and utter disaster. The courts and the media bested and exposed the Trump administration at every turn, and even now his supporters are beginning to turn on him. Also, as we said before, Trump is just getting started. It's entirely possible this list will need to be updated in the near future, perhaps even before we're done uploading it.
That is, if Trump is president long enough to try again. Moving along to number 2, we have the notorious Andrew Jackson, whose presidency was marked by the abuse of power. The first thing he did was veto bills. A lot. In fact, his 12 vetoes were more than the previous 6 presidents combined. As president, Jackson had conflicts with numerous congressmen, and the way he chose to spite them was to utilize vetoes. This grew Jackson's power substantially, as it allowed him to only pass bills which he liked. A good example of this was when Jackson vetoed the use of federal funds to build a road. That may not seem like a big deal, but the road did run through his chief rival, Henry Clay's town. Either way, the reason Jackson's vetoes were such executive overreach was because they undermined the ability of Congress to make laws. The major overreach Andrew Jackson did was publicly disobey a Supreme Court decision, which was really illegal and expanded his power hugely. The particular case I'm referencing is Rochester versus Georgia, which said that the Cherokees couldn't be forcibly removed from their land by the U.S. For a little background, Jackson really didn't like the Native Americans and passed the Indian Removal Act to move them west. After hearing of this ruling, Jackson did nothing, saying that John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. This overreach also used populism, as Jackson was able to get away with this by bending the will of the people. In his Jacksonian democracy, he made people dislike Native Americans, and thus they had no qualms with him illegally forcing them from their land. This situation was one of the biggest examples of executive overreach, as Jackson directly disobeyed the Supreme Court and could have grown his power as much as he wanted. But now, we'd like to list some honorable mentions before discussing our final offender. Brian?
Surprising as it may sound, there are a lot of presidents in the history of our country who tried to do this stuff. Too many, in fact, to fit into a top 5 video. Here's a short list of presidents who couldn't quite make our list. Thomas Jefferson, who tried to purge the Federalist courts of Federalist judges. Abraham Lincoln, who suspended habeas corpus in Maryland with an executive order during the Civil War. George W. Bush, who used 9/11 as a way to rally support for the passage of the Patriot Act, which authorizes the use of torture against suspected terrorists. Barack Obama, and last, who tried to use executive orders to get around Congress on the issues of healthcare and immigration.
Now, finally, what you've all been waiting for, our number one pick, Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon is a very infamous president for a number of reasons, which is why he's number 1 on our list. The famous scandal that he was involved in is Watergate, where he ordered people to sneak into the Democratic National Headquarters and find out information about their campaign strategy. These people were caught, and Nixon's following actions cemented him as one of the worst presidents ever. Initially, Nixon denied this action and tried to cover it up. The actions which he first took was wiretapping. Nixon understood that he was under investigation and wiretapped the CIA, FBI, and IRS, and in doing so, tried to obstruct justice. This undermines the Constitution as it obstructs due process. Another thing which Nixon did was fire his own prosecuting attorney. The Senate had hired an attorney to prosecute him, and Nixon fired him to impede the investigation. This undermines the authority of the Senate and was a complete abuse of his power. The final thing he did was lie under oath. On multiple occasions, Nixon lied about his involvement in the scandal, and this is completely unconstitutional. If a president were able to lie about all his actions, he would have practically unlimited power, and that would completely upset the current balance of power. For these reasons, Nixon had impeachment papers filed against him and is number 1 on our list.
The current situation in the White House is very concerning, and anyone who isn't alarmed either hasn't been reading the news or is lying to themselves. But hopefully this video has decreased your anxiety, because what we've shown is that we've been here before. There have been many presidents in our nation's history who tried to act as monarchs, and every time we've managed to protect our system of government. Trump will, without a doubt, try to weaken the institutions that keep him in check, but if we remain vigilant, he will fail, just like all the other ones before him ultimately did. Anyways, we hope you enjoyed our video, and if you disagree with our list, feel free to write your own list in the comments down below.
Just know that we won't read them.